Welcome to the Diverse Minds podcast, where we give you the tips, tools and techniques you need to be a mentally healthy and inclusive leader. Each week, you'll hear about a variety of topics linked to mental health, well-being and diversity that will enhance both your professional practice and personal well-being. Welcome to the 49th episode of the Diverse Minds podcast. And on today's episode, I'm going to be talking about South Asian History Month, what it means and why it's important. And I'm really excited to be recording this episode because this is the first year that South Asian History Month has been celebrated formally. South Asia comprises of 8 countries: Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan and Sri Lanka. The British South Asian community is over 3 million strong in the UK, with at least 1 out of every 20 people in this country having South Asian heritage. And as it's the first year that this has been celebrated, and the month runs from the 18th of July to the 17th of August, I really wanted to record a podcast episode about this. And the aim of the month is to raise the profile of the British South Asian community and history in the UK through education, arts, culture, and commemoration. And the goal is to help people understand the diversity of present-day Britain, as well as improving levels of social cohesion between various communities, so intercultural understanding and intracultural understanding. And South Asian Heritage Month is a collaboration between the Grand Trunk Project and the Partition Commemoration Campaign. The Grand Trunk Project was created by Jasveer Singh, OBE, and it takes its name from the Grand Trunk or GT Road, an ancient thoroughfare over 2,000 years old. It runs from Bangladesh through India, through Pakistan into Afghanistan, and the project was an attempt to build a bridge between the various communities that make up people of South Asian heritage in the UK. And in 2017, it marked the commemorations in an inclusive and non-judgmental way. The second is the Partition Commemoration Campaign, which was created by Dr. Benita Kane after being a contributor to Leo Burley and Anita Rani's award-winning BBC One documentary, My Family, Partition and Me, resulting in the 17th of August being declared as Partition Commemoration Day and the establishment of a UK working group to raise awareness of partition history in the British school educational system. One of the key elements is to improve education and literacy within British society about South Asian heritage, and this forms a key part of the month. And the whole idea is to build upon the momentum that was gathered during various commemorations around the UK, taking place in 2017, which marked the 70th year since independence of India, the creation of Pakistan, and the partition of Punjab and Bengal. However, due to the global pandemic and all the exciting things that I'm sure would have taken place face-to-face, it was decided that this month was going to be launched online, and the idea is to then galvanise support for creating more events and more interest in 2021. Now, you might be listening to this and you might not be from South Asian background. But if you listen to my episode about racism and genuine allyship, where I set up my stall about this and whose voices get heard and how they are heard, it is about raising awareness of rarely told and overlooked histories. So do explore some of the projects and get involved, even if you're not from a South Asian background. But I also think, sadly, the colonial history that has impacted so many communities of colour is a really important part of South Asian History Month, to understand how India was torn apart and split into separate countries, and the religious divisions still affect people around the globe today. Part of the month there are exhibitions online that help shed light on the things that are not taught in schools, and please do check out the South Asian History Month website, and I've included the link in the show notes. They've got a great Twitter page, there's a brilliant video that they've launched as well. And the partition group, and again, I've included a link in the show notes, the whole aim for them is they want the school curricula at both primary and secondary levels to better represent the history and heritage of multicultural society in Britain and acknowledge the impact that British Empire and colonialism had on Indian history. Now, Indian history, it was one country, it's not anymore. And that also teachers need to understand and be empowered to explore issues around colonialism and the impact it's had on history in 1948, previously, and to the present day. And all pupils need and should have the opportunity to discuss and explore multiple interpretations of history, whose story gets heard, how it's told. And of course, there are many hidden histories that exist, so these need to be uncovered and also spoken about. And it is very, very important to remember partition, because India, when it was partitioned into 2 separate states in August 1947, The border between the Hindu-majority India and Muslim-majority Pakistan was kept secret to the very last minute. The Punjab was split down the middle, and many people did not know if they would be living in Pakistan or India. And this decision was absolutely a matter of life and death. It is thought that between 1 and 2 million people died, and 15 million people were displaced as Muslims had to flee to Pakistan and Hindus and Sikhs had to head in the opposite direction. And for people that are still alive in their 80s, 70s, late 70s and 80s, if you look at oral history that's available, they talk about the fact that people lived side by side together happily and didn't see any reason for the partition. And how some people were lucky that their town ended up one side and that was their religious identity, but other people had to flee. And that people didn't know what was in store, and this was really, really frightening. And I'm not a historical expert, so I've had to learn a lot of this myself. And we don't know what we don't know, and I think a lot of British Asians may not be aware of how horrific it was. But it's super important that we keep talking about it and remember the stories and capture those stories. And it's vital to know about the occupation of India and how it was painfully fragmented due to occupation, essentially. Now, earlier this year, before the lockdown, I was fortunate enough to see a play called Common Salt. And Common Salt is a performance, a show and tell, that was run by two women, Sheila Gilani and Sue Palmer. And it explored the colonial and geographical history of England and India, taking an expansive and emotional time travel from the first Enclosure Act and the start of the East India Company in 1600s to 21st century narratives of trade, empire and culture. And what Sue and Sheila did was absolutely fantastic. They looked at various historical sources, they travelled around the UK, they went into archives, and it was really based on the Great Hedge of India, so about the borders and collections. And very little is known about the Great Hedge of India, but they talked about this book that was written, and Common Salt is about a reckoning, the interconnectedness between history, global power, artefact, trade, nature and memory, and how things are hidden in plain sight, and how often language is formed by colonial constructs. And Roy Moxham, the author of The Great Hedge of India, had done extensive research and very little remains of this hedge. But essentially there was a hedge dividing India during occupation of India by the British. And there was a levy on duty of salt. And it was effectively a customs line which was established and stretched across the whole of India, which in 1869 extended from the Indus to the Mahandi in Madras, a distance of 2,300 miles, and it was guarded by 12,000 men. And if we think about that, it would have stretched from London to Istanbul today. And it was an immensely impenetrable hedge of thorny trees and bushes, so that people had to pay duty and salt tax. And as a result, thousands upon thousands of people died because they couldn't afford the salt tax and they were dehydrated and salt was required for many things. Now, this is just one story that I wanted to share, and please do check out the website because they were touring, but of course this has been postponed, so they will be touring again once things are back up and running. And I strongly urge you to watch it. It was absolutely brilliant. So why aren't things more widely known about? Well, of course, history is very subjective and it's not always recorded with the people who have suffered in mind. Now, there is an African proverb, and I'm afraid I can't tell you which African country, but it states, "Until the lion learns to write, every story will glorify the hunter." And I think this is absolutely what's happened with Black, Asian, Chinese, South American history. But we need to know our history, which has too often been disguised, hidden, and made positive, in order for us to know where we're headed and where we need to go. And the mental toll and mental ill health effects as a result of partition still have huge impacts on communities today. And I've included a note in the show notes that talks about the impact that trauma has on DNA. It's a scientific article, it's been published and certified. So if you want to know more about that, please do check that out. Now, if this is of interest to you or you'd like to talk to me, don't forget that I can help you, whether it's in the workplace or individually. You can book a free 30-minute call with me to find out more. And keep listening because I'll mention the link at the end of the show. So as I said, I'm not a historical expert, but I think it's very important that people are aware of all histories of different countries, different cultures, because it is effectively all interlinked a lot of the time. So how could you get involved in South Asian History Month? Maybe from a personal perspective, or you want to do something with your workplace, or you're listening and you'd simply like to find out more. Well, one of the things I would say is do check out the website, the South Asian History Month website, and that's so it's run from the Manchester Museums in quarantine.com, and there's a whole list of what's on, things that you can attend online and get involved in. Also, the second thing is you can raise awareness about the month and use social media to tweet using the hashtag South Asian History Month and let people know that you're part of the month, because we need to raise awareness that this is happening. Think about how your workplace could get involved. It could be a small thing. It could be, again, using social media, highlighting that the month's happening. If people from your work community want to share any stories about their own histories and families. And I think this is really important, because I am sick to death of hearing of the one story about Asian women in arranged marriages. It's getting incredibly boring and one-directional and one-sided for me. So in next week's episode, I'm going to be talking about how there's so much more to Asian women than arranged marriages. So spread the word, but also spread all the interesting things that are happening that go beyond this one single story. And if any of your workplace colleagues want to get involved and share stories from their families, that could be a really good way of doing that. Watch programmes. There's always a series of programmes on TV in the UK, particularly the BBC, that highlight the issue of history and occupation, what's been happening. There might also be some things that have been added to iPlayer from previous years, and I think a lot of them are very good quality, so you might want to check those out. And as it's the first year, you might want to start thinking about 2021 already. And don't forget, there could be things as well while you do your planning for 2021. Don't forget, Black History Month is just around the corner, and you could start planning for that because it's in October. And as I said, this isn't about just one story. This isn't just about South Asians. Remember that this is British history. It's not just South Asian history. And there'll be South Asian voices need to be heard within that. But this is everyone's history. So, really excited that this has been the first year of South Asian History Month. We all have a part to play in raising awareness about it. Attend events to find out more, start talking and share things on social media. Think about how your workplace could get involved, and people who want to speak and tell their story, give them a platform in a way that works for them. And this isn't just a flash in the pan. If you can't do anything now, maybe people are on holiday. I'm doing this podcast a little bit later than I would have done usually. So start planning for 2021, or you could even think about cultural events that are related to this, like Diwali or Eid. Dharma Day has just passed as well, but there are lots of things that you could do. And if anything I've said has been useful to you, please, and you want to talk about it more, please do book a 30-minute call with me. And you can do so on my Calendly at calendly.com/Layla, Leylao. And the resources I've mentioned are the South Asian History Month website, South Asian History Month on Twitter, the Partition Group and the work of the Partition Group if you want to know more about what they're doing to try and get this talked about in schools, in primary and secondary curricula, the Trauma and Impact on DNA, the Common Salt, the play, and Indian Summers is a fantastic organisation, and they're actually doing some events a bit later. So if there are things that you missed out on, then do check that out as well. So it's indiansummer.org, and 2 podcasts related to this, Race and Genuine Allyship and Black History Month. So I really hope you've enjoyed the show and I've given you some food for thought to think about. If you enjoyed the show, please don't forget to leave me a review on Apple Podcasts, or also follow and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Diverse Minds podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you access your podcasts from. You can also connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Tune into next week's episode of the podcast, where I'll bring you more insights on mental health and inclusion. Bye for now.